developers that you sort of observed could be good ways to monetize. How much should app developers be thinking about how they're going to monetize on their own independently, and how much should they be thinking about trying to expect a certain amount of monetization support out of the platform that they're integrating with?
I mean, I think the problem with most platforms right now is that there are very few which have mature setups that allow payments or money to flow right through them. Like a few of them that you can probably name are things like Apple and Facebook, right? Apple has their iAds platform, which is awesome. The developers I've talked to are using it right now, love it. Facebook has Facebook credits, and that moves money through a system right now. Like even people like Twitter, we're not that far down our road on how we're going to do monetization. Like we've clearly laid down publicly that we're planning to do rev shares, what the rev share numbers are going to look like, but we haven't yet started rolling that out to developers. So if I were being cynical, I wouldn't want to depend on a platform to do it for me. I would want to make sure that I had my own strategy involved on it. And additionally, on top of that, like I also wouldn't go down the road of tying myself to one platform. And I've actually even been recommending that to some people who are building social media applications, to not only build Twitter apps, but you need to be thinking of building a Twitter and a Facebook and a whatever app, and sort of looking at ways to merge data together and basically like amortize your risk across all the platforms. Well, I think that's just a more mature strategy to go forth and to do it, given the state of the platform world and money these days.
Yeah, I guess the counterpoint to saying whether the platforms are there and have a monetization solution now, give a couple examples. I think Apple is a very, very special case, but Facebook is an interesting example where they didn't have monetization. All of the apps were independently monetizing, and quite frankly, there's been plenty of discussion that it's highly disruptive now that Facebook is sort of trying to intercede and make demands that their currency and their monetization be sort of the core system. So I guess that's sort of the trade-off I'm thinking about. If I'm a new app developer, I'm trying to decide, do I put in the effort to build this out myself on the possibility that it's going to get sort of squeezed out by a solution out of the platform, or do I just approach the platform and sort of...
I mean, I think you just made my point for me. I think you're going to have to do it yourself, and I think you're going to have to try to spread your risk amongst more than one platform and not just build on that one to go with. Yeah. Twitter has even taken some flack ourselves because we've told certain advertising companies they can't operate the way they used to be operating in our new world of promoted tweets. Facebook, for some reason I haven't blanked about that, but Facebook, you're correct. Like, most people were doing their own monetization. They got squeezed out by the new Facebook rules and new Facebook regime. I think the mature thing to do is you have about how to use the platform as a distribution strategy to get more users, how to get more interactions, but you have to deal with monetization. You have to be prepared to deal with monetization on your own.
Cool. Tom, shifting topics a little bit, I know you've spoken, I've seen some of your other interviews, things you've done about sort of the importance of performance optimization versus the reality of sort of the internet and sort of how it really operates. Sure. If I'm an application developer, what do you think are some of the kind of important performance considerations that I need to make going into building on top of a third-party solution, essentially?
Sure. I think to reference the previous question is most of it comes down to money, right? At the end of the day, there's some critical action in whatever you're doing that is the thing that causes you to make money. Whether that's a payment, whether that's some shopping cart system, whether that's having your ads load on time, whether that's conversion. So for us, how fast people can search. All of these factors, this critical thing in your business, and you have to optimize around that. Now, one of the things that we're seeing a lot is that people are really interested in using platforms to add value to their services rather than being a core feature. And I think this goes back to Rafi's point. I was actually thinking, as I was saying about not relying on a single platform, there was an Israeli company that literally went bankrupt when Google decided to block them from AdSense. And their business literally crumpled overnight. I don't remember the name of the company, but this is maybe a year ago. And because 90% of their revenue came from AdSense, their entire business literally crumbled. And I think that's a really important factor to think about. If you have a core piece of your infrastructure that's dependent on some third party outside of your control, that's an incredibly risky proposal. So whether you're using platforms like EC2 and Rackspace to host, you should use two platforms, and if one of them has an outage, you can fall back onto your backup plan. And I think that's true for most of these things. And if you're relying on some other piece of infrastructure outside of your control, having multiple redundancies is really helpful, and that even goes for the social stuff, right? Maybe you plug into Twitter or Yahoo status updates in order to get an audience, but if you're relying on any single platform, you know, they could pull the rug out from under you.
Yeah. So I think if you're thinking about distribution in particular, having some diversity makes a lot of sense because it gives you a real breadth. I think the thing maybe that, you know, putting my developer hat back on that would make me uncomfortable, and I appreciate actually the frankness from folks here who could say, don't worry, we're awesome, we'll use us, right? I mean, I think it's great that you guys are saying, hedge your bets, integrate multiple solutions, or at least be prepared to, but at some point, the overhead of having to manage the risk of the platform failing starts to eat into the value of deferring this work to someone else. So if it's going to be the cost for me of integrating 3 or 4 payment providers, at some point maybe it makes sense for me to just integrate to a lower level service, and then I can trust myself to manage it. So how do you sort of talk to developers who are concerned about that trade-off of the overhead of managing multiple platforms?
So we have a product that's specifically targeted at this. We have a product called YQL, which is the Yahoo query language, and it actually abstracts the interface to lots of web service APIs. So you can access Twitter, you can access Facebook, you can access the Yahoo APIs, and it abstracts it, and it's kind of like SQL. So for us, we think that's a big deal. We think that aggregation is going to be one of the, I think that it's going to be one of the big topics coming up in using platforms. But at the same time, I think, you know, you can't do anything but hedge, and it's how much do you hedge? The cost of, if you host on EC2, for example, the cost of having that level of service yourself, I mean, I think realistically EC2 probably operates at 3 nines. You know, hosting that yourself is incredibly difficult, but you can't necessarily rely on Amazon. So if you host Amazon and Rackspace, there's a little bit of extra cost, but now, you know, you have an incredible amount of reliability for a substantially lower cost than if you did it yourself.
But it's actually at different levels though. I mean, just take the example of Google App Engine and Amazon EC2. In the cloud computing, I'm sure most of you guys know, there's IaaS, infrastructure as a service, and PaaS, platform as a service, and SaaS, software as a service. Most of the time, people combine all 3 as cloud computing. But EC2, Rackspace, and there are a bunch of other stuff out there, the providers out there. They're all the infrastructure as a service. And most of the time, it's not a big deal when you build something on top of them because it's really a Linux or a Windows box or whatever that you get, and you build stuff on it and they all work fine. And it's easy to migrate from one to another. But when you go up the chain, when you go up to platform as a service, now you're making things specific to that particular platform. When you build something on Google App Engine, you can't just take that and run it on Amazon.
But I think that's only so true. So for example, for payments, you know, there are libraries that abstract.
So there's another level. So when we go to the software as a service level, now you can't just switch over from one service provider to another service provider, even though they're providing the same service, that's a payment. You can't just simply migrate over unless they provide a way to port your data. So you can't just migrate from Amazon FPS to PayPal, for example, or Google Cloud, just like that, because all your user information is with those providers. So there are different levels, different tiers that you need to worry about. And when you're mainly dealing with the support or the service provider, other providers, all these things come into play. Fortunately, there are standards coming out, not at every level, but at least at the cloud infrastructure as a service level. Recently, the Rackspace guys launched this new initiative called OpenStack. You guys should go and check out OpenStack. All they're really doing is trying to standardize the way the systems are implemented and the data is stored at different layers in the cloud, which is good. Now the next thing is to see everyone else adopt that standard. Once everyone adopts it, then that solves one problem. And then we go to the data problem. I mean, even with identity, there's a lot of questions around who owns your identity. And then even though I'm using Yahoo OpenID to log into something else, what if Yahoo shuts down my OpenID service? Am I going to lose my stuff on the third party relying party that I'm logged into? So those kinds of questions are still unanswered. So there has to be different levels of standardization needs to happen.
Yeah. So
I mean, all those